good evening again, everyone, and welcome. My name is Isabel Molina, and I am the public programs producer here at the Museum of Jewish Heritage, a living memorial to the Holocaust. I'm very pleased to welcome you to today's Curator Talk for our new exhibition, Art of Freedom, the Life and Work of Arthur Szyk. Here at the museum, we are dedicated to the crucial mission of educating our diverse community about Jewish life and heritage before, during, and after the Holocaust. As part of that mission, our programs illuminate the stories of survivors, broader histories of hate and antisemitism, stories of resistance against injustice, and more. Thank you for joining us today virtually. We hope that if you're able to, you will visit the museum in person to see our current and upcoming exhibitions, including the one we'll be discussing this evening, Art of Freedom, the Life and Work of Arthur Szyk, which opens December 7th, 2025. We hope you'll join us on opening day, Sunday, December 7th, for exhibition tours with Irvin Ungar. Now, closed captions are available on today's program, and instructions on how to turn those captions on or off are posted in the chat. If you have questions for our speakers during the program, please put them in the Zoom Q&A box, and we'll get to as many as we can at the end of the hour. Now, today, we are honored to be joined by Irvin Ungar and Sara Softness. Irvin Ungar, an antiquarian bookseller and former pulpit rabbi, has devoted the past 3 decades to scholarship on Arthur Szyk. He is the author of Justice Illuminated, the Art of Arthur Szyk, and the National Jewish Book Award-winning Arthur Szyk, Soldier in Art. He is also co-producer of the documentary film Soldier in Art, Arthur Szyk, and the creator and publisher of the luxury limited edition of the Szyk Haggadah. Irvin's memoir on his life with Arthur Szyk, titled Reviving the Artist Who Fought Hitler, will be published in May 2026 by the University of Texas Press Austin. More information about that book can also be found at the links in the chat. Sara Softness is Director of Curatorial Affairs at the Museum of Jewish Heritage, a living memorial to the Holocaust, where she has organized several recent exhibitions and oversees the stewardship of the museum's permanent collection and its exhibition program. With an interdisciplinary background in European cultural and intellectual history, she has previously held curatorial roles at the Guggenheim Museum, the Brooklyn Museum, and the Beinecke Library. She writes and lectures on Jewish art history and visual artists referencing the Holocaust. She has an MA from Yale University in European and Russian Studies. Thanks again for joining us. I'm now going to hand things over to Sara, who will kick us off. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Isabel. I know I speak on behalf of Irvin when I say that we are so thrilled to see this exhibition come to life. And we are particularly excited to have this group on this evening to get a bit of a sneak peek and a bit of a behind the scenes look at the thought processes that went into the exhibition. As Isabel said, exhibitions in general are best seen in person. So if you happen to be local or can come to New York in the next 8 months or so, we really hope to see you here. And Szyk's artwork will reward you for your trouble. So I want to quickly just kind of set the stage for the talk that we're going to do tonight and a bit about Arthur Szyk and kind of why we're so excited to have an exhibition of his work at the museum. So Arthur Szyk was a Polish Jewish artist and naturalized American later in his life. He's best known and interestingly, unlike many great artists, he was known during his lifetime and then largely forgotten. It is thanks to Irvin's tireless work that Arthur Szyk regains recognition all the time, and we hope that our exhibition is among those efforts to bring his name back into common parlance. But he was well known in World War II in particular for very trenchant cartoons that he made, lampooning, Nazi and Axis leaders in particular. So, Hitler and Goering and Hirohito and all of these sort of intensely biting satire pieces. Um, some of that is on view in this exhibition. But beyond that, he led a very interesting life. He was a extremely devoted and committed artist who cared not only about the art he was making, it was certainly not art for art's sake. It was art that was usually pressed into the service of some sort of justice. So, thinking about Arthur Szyk and many different ways of identifying himself and belonging over the course of his life as a Polish person, as a Jewish person, and later as an American person. And then later toward the end of the 1940s as a fierce advocate for the establishment of the State of Israel. So, in addition to being a incredibly talented um, artist, illustrator, and illuminator, he was a fierce defender of the Jewish people. So to have him here at the Museum of Jewish Heritage certainly makes a great deal of sense, and we're really excited to celebrate his life. Um, Art of Freedom is a title that kind of works on a few levels. We wanted to have this notion that, of course, there are pictures in here that sort of speak to ideas of freedom, but it also is the art of freedom is an evolving art, is one that requires practice and work. It is not a static notion. So you will see that throughout Arthur Szyk's life and work, especially in this exhibition, that he had various causes that he subscribed to. He was a incredibly fierce advocate for those he did, and not all of those always made sense. There could hold two truths at once was a big theme for Arthur Szyk. Um, I want to draw your attention to our opening date, so December 7th. Many of you will recognize that that is the date that the United States entered World War II. And that is a good segue into what I'm excited to talk about tonight with Irvin, which is a bit of Szyk's interest in Americana and American history, and this kind of period, even before he moves to the United States during the 1930s, where he is creating a series of books that we are calling the Three Great Books of Freedom. So one of them is a series on Washington, hence the picture you see here. And that is kind of where we're going to jump off tonight and give some background into the American context of Arthur Szyk's works and imagining. So I just want to quickly show you. This is Arthur Szyk. There is a very this is a spread from a magazine, Click Magazine, 1942, The One Man War Against Hitler. So I wanted to give you just a taste of the work that he is sort of well known for, and a picture of the artist himself. And again, a kind of send up of who he was in his core, a Jewish person and a Jewish maker. I am but a Jew praying in art. So with that, I want to send it over to Irvin to get us started on our curator's talk tonight. Hi, Irv.
Hey, Sarah, nice to see you again. I saw you a few hours ago when I was at the
Indeed.
museum, and I got a preview of the coming attractions for its viewers. It is stunning. I think people are going to go crazy about this. It's a gem, and it's so tastefully done by you and your staff. I'm saying this at the beginning. I could say this at the end of the talk, but I want people to know this is a special exhibition, and people, I think you will love it. Let me begin by setting the stage for Szyk's three major works on freedom, three portfolios that sort of give you an insight into the diversity of the artist and breadth and depth of the man himself. Um, I think if I had to do this, I think I should start with a year that most people will recognize quite quickly when I say the year is 1933 and Hitler has comes to power in January, and Arthur Szyk and the United States government in 1933, with the encouragement of the Polish government, encourages Arthur Szyk to travel to America for his first visit. Why? Because the Library of Congress wishes to exhibit Arthur Szyk's major works on freedom that he had completed up until that time. And here you see two images which represent those two bodies of works. On the left, you see the Statute of Kalisz. Here it features, Casimir the Great, who ratified the statutes that were passed in 1264 in Poland by Boleslav the Pious that granted Jews uh, privileges and religious freedoms and freedom in general in Poland. And Szyk wanted to celebrate that as he began to illustrate it and to paint it in the late 1920s when he was living in Paris. And so this work, together with the body of work on the right-hand side, um, represented by Washington and his Times. I should add that the statutes consisted of about 44 leaves, 44 paintings, and Washington and his Times on the right consisted of 38 paintings. And this series of work was done in preparation almost for the 200th anniversary of George Washington's birthday. I think it was 1732. So in 1932 represented 200th anniversary of America. We have 250 coming up. And since the Declaration of Independence was signed, that is. But in any case, these two bodies of work were going to be exhibited at the Library of Congress. So Szyk arrived on a day in New York, a little bit similar to this December day, but it was snowing in December of 1933 when he arrived for the exhibit. At the time that he came here, his works of art were actually these works of art, together with others, were being exhibited at the Brooklyn Museum, not far from about a half hour's ride, I suppose, from where these works will be exhibited as you begin to see them opening Sunday. In any case, Szyk completed these two portfolios, and they were on exhibit here. Sarah will jump in and tell you a little bit about them, perhaps. But I want to add that this wasn't the first time these works were being exhibited. It turns out that he had finished them and completed them in 1932, but in 1930, or they were printed and published in 1932, but he had already finished both of these portfolios in Paris. And in 1931, they were exhibited in Paris at a huge and well-known exposition. It turns out also in 1931, Szyk was invited to Geneva by the League of Nations to exhibit, to illuminate, the only artist in the world who was invited to Geneva to illuminate the Charter of the League of Nations, a project he began and later abandoned as he didn't feel that the League fulfilled what he thought, what his dreams were of what the League should do. But he was invited to Geneva, and these works were exhibited there. And then in 1932, that is the year before he came to America for the first time, the Polish government itself traveled these two bodies of work to 14 cities in Poland. That is, the government of Poland traveled these works of a Polish Jew about freedom 1 year before Hitler came to power. And now these works are traveling to the United States with the assistance of the Polish Foreign Minister Zaleski and the Polish government, and working with Congressman Saul Bloom in the United States Congress. They helped bring Arthur Szyk to America and these bodies of works for the American public to see. Sarah, you want to jump in on these in any way?
Yeah, well, I want to add that just to kind of add some contextual information that, so Szyk is born in 1894, right? And so he's a fairly young man at the point where he is becoming not only a kind of chronicler of his own times, but looking back to the past to really use the past as parable for the contemporary moment. And he is having amazing success doing that, as you're saying. Or if he's not, he's shown in 14 cities in Poland, he's invited to Geneva, he's invited to the United States. So just to kind of reiterate that we're dealing with someone who's working really on an international stage, and who is really with such precision digs into history to make a point about a present moment. So Irv, can you tell us more about the statute and what
Sure.
it
The
was?
stat, yeah, sure. The statute was, Arthur Szyk felt that the Jews of Europe needed to be understood by not only the Polish government, but by the nations of the world at a time when Jewish freedoms were being again challenged in Europe. And so he set out not only to illuminate that charter for the people of his time, but also not only to show the rights that were granted to the Jews of Poland, but to show what Jews themselves also had done for Poland throughout the centuries. And so it really was to show the mutual and beneficial cooperation that existed, that Szyk hoped for, in Poland and in Europe, emphasizing that, countries will benefit when they empower their minorities and allow them to be successful, as we've witnessed in the many countries which Jews have lived, to which they've contributed. And we've seen what has happened to countries when they've expelled their Jews and what has happened. So if you can embrace them, and that was what Szyk's message was. And yeah, here you're seeing three fascinating images. Sarah, would you like to comment on any of them here?
Yeah, so I just got a note in the chat. It says you can't really see what's written under the pictures. I'm sorry about that, but from left to right. So we have on the left six tradesmen and craftsmen. So as you can see, Szyk is giving us six different tableaus of Jewish people at work in their various trades and crafts. In particular, of some note, perhaps, is this bagel maker or baker. And in the second instance is Jewish minters striking the first Polish coin. And what you see here is, again, not only this incredibly intricate tableau. And so here you're really starting to get a sense for Szyk's talent as a miniaturist and as a illuminator. This rich patterning and color and everything else, but also a sense too of the kind of desire for universality that Szyk enters into the statute. Here he's writing in both Polish and in French. And in later slides, we'll show you that he also made leaves with the statute in Yiddish and the statute in English. So he is already minded toward kind of accessibility, which is amazing to think about. And also just you get Szyk's really amazing ability to shapeshift as an artist. You see this work here, which is a little more kind of has a bit of a more flattened perspective, is the Jewish sailors exporting Polish goods through the port of Gdansk. So, as Irv said, these are sort of extremely direct and explicit scenes where Jews are not just contributing, but integral to Polish history more broadly.
You know, um, and think about this. These are when you see the text there in the image in the middle. These are illuminated. These are in the style. This is illumination, and it was said of Szyk, and he illuminated these in Paris. That's where he was living at the time, and it was written about him that many considered him the greatest illuminator in over 400 years since the 16th century. And that's what was written about him in Paris at the time. I mean, he's already, he's working in a style, obviously, that's anachronistic by, 400 years. And here, modern art is being created in Paris, and Szyk is reverting to this. And why? Because an illuminated text has a specific message. There's nothing abstract. There's nothing you guess about it. And what Szyk is doing when he takes text with words, but also when he has, paintings themselves, there's always a message that's, he used to say, art is not my aim, it's my means. Um, uh, Whatever. And it was so in terms of creating, bridges between peoples and nations, or attacking injustice or racism or bigotry, as we see particularly highlighted in his World War II works. But when you see these watercolors and gouache paintings up close, and by the way, keep in mind these are miniatures. These are not large. These are, I'm going to hold my hand like this. These may be 7 inches high,
Yeah.
8 inches, 6 inches by, 4 or 5 inches wide. And these are watercolor and gouache on paper. He never worked in oils, never worked on canvas. So a little bit about the technique. When you come to the exhibit, you're going to see sterling images. I mean, you're going to see, and miniatures. So anyhow, just a little bit aside about that in terms of its overall context. Yeah.
Yes, and just notice a question in the chat of can we show or can we say out the trades or crafts that are here in these six? So we have a tailor and a cobbler, a baker, someone at the loom. I'm not sure what the
Weaver, yeah.
weaver, welder, I think, and a watchmaker.
Yeah, the Zegermacher. There he goes, right down there. And I think it's a shoesmith. What do you call it when you fix shoes? You're a
Yeah, a cobbler, is that right? I
yeah.
think so. Um,
Or is it-
so
okay.
yes, so as I mentioned too, here is another leaf from the statute series, and this one has the charter written in English. So again, this was sort of meant to be seen by many, many, many different people, reading it in different languages.
I would add here, and it's also in Italian. I don't think he did the calligraphy on these, even though they're in different languages. That's a very rare occasion. That and the Declaration of Independence. It may be someone, I have this feeling about this, but almost always he did all of the calligraphy, certainly in Hebrew. That was his calligraphy when he did the Haggadah. But here you see that. This, by the way, is I think this work was either done in 1927 or 28 in Paris. This is the first time he began to use American symbols in his art. And what you'll see is, Sarah, more sort of overlapping with your commentary here. But if I can point out that you have two figures, bottom left and bottom right. Bottom left, you'll see Casimir Pulaski, who was the head of the cavalry in the Continental Army, Polish military figure who came to America. And then on the far right, you have one of the financiers of the American Revolution, Chaim Solomon, whom Szyk is painting in Paris from Poland, painting an American figure. Again, his knowledge, there were two uh, aspects of Szyk that are quite evident. One is this was a man who loved art and who loved history. And so it was his job to try to begin to learn all of American history, which we'll talk about in a minute when we get to Washington's Times. But here on the image of both Pulaski in the lower left and Chaim Solomon lower right, you'll see in the upper corners of those images the Polish eagle and the American the shield of the stars and stripes. So here are, the beginning of that. Of course, you have King George slaying the dragon in the center, which really represents the triumph of good over evil, which is what Szyk was hoping for at the time.
Well, it's a good segue into our next series, the next Book of Freedom, as we so call it, that is on view in the exhibition, and that was important for Szyk in the 30s. And I hope, Irv, I mean, I want you to kind of speak to this, but also, you were just saying, here's a Polish emigre in Paris looking to the American example. What is he what's so inspiring to him about America at this point?
Well, first let's say that Szyk loved three countries. He loved Poland, the land of his birth, which is, and he didn't make any bones about it. I mean, he loved Poland. He didn't like the anti-Semitism that he had known about, but he believed in the Polish leaders and embraced his motherland. He loved Israel, which he saw as the land of his people, and he did visit there, 1914. And he loved America, which he saw as the land of his ideals. And I think he wanted to come for some time. It may be that Julia, his wife, was not eager to move to America, but in any case, I think her taste of America in 1933, 34, when they were here for 7 months, was, good enough to make her want to come and move here for good when they finally did in 1940. But I think he was stirred by the ideals of freedom. I think the idea of the American Revolution appealed to him. I mean, this is a fighter of justice. He saw himself as a young age painting, heroic figures, both Jewish and non-Jewish, and I think America really represented that to him, and hence he began to learn American history, before his first visit, and it's evidenced here, in Washington in his times. Um,
And
I think we should comment on the image on the far left, Sarah. You want to take a stab at that, or you want me to say something about it?
you go, Irv,
All right.
please.
So what's really interesting here in this image, this is the struggle on Concord Bridge. I'm just getting close to that just to make sure I read it correctly. Battles of Concord, Lexington. Uh, Szyk also had this really passionate idea about the freedom of the black man, which he saw as problematic, in the history of America. In fact, there's a piece very specifically in which he attacks Thomas Jefferson for having slaves, but you'll have to come to the exhibit, maybe listen to a tour and learn more about that. But in any case, here in this image in the far left, in the very front of the image, and you can see that Szyk has a perspective here, as you can see, but in the very front is the fellow with the pink, dressed in pink. It's a black man. And Szyk has painted him as being as fallen in battle. I think severely wounded, critically, I think for sure. And this is Prince Easterbrook or Prince Estabrook, who was fighting for freedom in America, for America, at a time when blacks themselves were not free. And so here is again a Jew in Paris from Poland who's concerned about the plight of the black man in America. You move to the center in Washington, crossing the, I think he's crossing the Delaware,
Delaware.
and this is, I think he probably knew the painting of Leutze when he, set out to do this, as he was probably familiar with all the portraits that Gilbert Stuart had done when he set out to, paint the image of George Washington, which I think you're going to be showing shortly. And so here you see a couple of the scenes that Szyk do. I think he wanted to create more the feeling than the historicity of events, that everything was exact, because sometimes he'll place a person at an event who wasn't there, but he wants to emphasize that person's importance. So, but nonetheless, this is the series, and
Yeah,
it's quite stunning.
it is. And I will say, you're right. I think his sort of interesting relationship to narrating history, because he's not afraid to sort of do something anachronistic, but at the same time, we know that he is quite fastidious about kind of getting regalia and weaponry and garb correct, like that. Can you say a little bit about that? Because I know we are
Sure.
seeing a lot of different um, fighters represented here,
Right.
and in various different kinds of uniform.
Swords, helmets, hats, they had to be accurate for Arthur Szyk. If he was painting a pistol in a scene, it had to be, and it was a Colt. He knew it was a Colt, and he painted it as the Colt pistol. If you were a soldier fighting, if you were a Jewish soldier, depending upon if it was the end of World War II or the middle of World War II, you might be wearing a helmet, an American helmet or a British helmet, but he was making a point by why they would have that specific helmet at that time. When he had no regard for the British, he was putting American helmets on soldiers. It depended on how he felt at the time, but he was trying to be historically accurate with all of the symbols that he was using in his images, for sure.
Well, we got a question in the chat. Is this gentleman here wearing a strimel?
Oh, yeah, of
Which
course. There were Jews in America at the time. I don't know that he was one of them.
I don't know
But
if he was one of them.
nonetheless, yes. But look in his Haggadah. You're going to see fabulous strimals in the Haggadah. He has actually price tags underneath him. How much? No, I'm only kidding. But he does have, you'll see religious Jews, very religious Jews in his Haggadah, and they are wearing a strimal. Of course, you'll see secular Jews in the Haggadah as well. So, but yes, that's very,
Yeah.
somebody pointed that out.
But hats abound, so
Oh,
fair
for
enough.
sure. Hats off to the viewer who questioned about that. Okay.
I just for anyone interested in art history or art historians among us, I think this the first time I saw Szyck's Struggle on Concord Bridge, this Delacroix painting immediately came to mind, and it's of course interesting to remember that Szyk is in Paris at the time that he makes this print, and the kind of both compositional and spiritual thematic in these two works of art, I think is totally unmistakable. And it points to another kind of element of Szyk, that he is extremely well read, that he kind of educates himself, both in books and museums, to learn as much as he can, which is like becomes evident when, as only Irv has studied the details, the minute details of so many Szyk works, you begin to see certain resonances, and he really was a man of the world. And it is interesting again that he could have looked to the French Revolution and done a series on that, but he didn't. So something interesting to keep in mind.
I just saw in the chat from Tamar that it was a French fur trader, perhaps, who was wearing the strimal.
There you have it. Yes.
A Jewish French fur trader.
Um,
Okay.
okay, so moving on, go ahead, Irv.
Okay, so he comes to America in 1933, December. He's here for 7 months, and then he returns back to Poland. And it is then that he begins to work on his third great book of freedom. And as after the statutes, after Washington and his Times portfolios, he begins to work on the Haggadah. And he's back in Poland. It's 1934. And I might add that Arthur Szyk had begun to work on a Haggadah back in the 1920s. Although he completed it, it was never published. But here he begins now to focus on it in a new light, in a new style, with a new message to be delivered. And so from 1934 to 1936, he illuminates 48 leaves. You're seeing two of them here. And then with this artwork, he eventually then moves to London in 1937, takes his portfolio and his art with him for the purpose of publishing the Haggadah. He supervises its work for 3 years. And then in 1940, the first edition of the Szyk Haggadah is published. At the time, the Times of London said about this book that it's worthy of being considered among the most beautiful of books ever produced by the hand of man. And also, I might add that at this time, this was the most expensive new book in the entire world. It was selling for $500 a copy. And I like to tell people, honestly, I think in many streets in America, you could buy a house for $500. So go check it out, prove me wrong, come to the exhibit and say, Mr. Ungar, you're wrong. You couldn't buy a house. But I think I found something that enables us to compare to how valued his work was, what people had to say about it. But this book was going to be different than any other Haggadah among the thousands of illustrated or thousands of different editions of the Haggadah. Szyk was going to emphasize here that where he saw Hitler as the new Pharaoh, he saw the Nazis as the new Egyptians, who'd come to annihilate his people. And in that sense, I go back to the slide just a second, Sarah. In that sense,
Oops, sorry.
yeah, right there, you'll see the four sons on the right. By the way he did that, he painted swastikas on the Egyptians in the Haggadah, which were removed prior to publication. That's an entire different lecture. We don't have time for it tonight or in this presentation. But on the right, you see the four sons, and the quadrant, the upper left-hand corner, you'll see the wicked son, who's very German-esque. And I'm sorry, probably it's hard to see on your screen, but he has a German mustache, a very Hitler-esque mustache, I might add. And you'll see the three Polish Jews and the German Jew there, which carries through this theme of Germany. But there's more about that, and we're going to cut that part short just because of time. What else do we have from the Haggadah, Sarah? Okay. Well, baby Moses. By the way, Sarah, I don't think we've discussed this, but if you look closely, I think this baby has the face of a small Arthur Szyk. It may be I'm reading into this too much, that this baby, this redeemer, that Schick himself is going to, redeem the Jewish people through his art. But here is because I do have, there's a 1927 painting where he actually paints himself as a cherub, and there's two of them that are flanking actually an almighty dollar bill, but that's a whole other work of art. But if I trace his self-portraits back and back and back, I'm to now probably, when he's, geez, I don't know how old he is there, a few days old. No, he's more than a few days. Maybe, I don't know. In any case, here, if Min Hamaya Mishitihu, he drew him out, Mishitihu. He took him out, from the water. He's drawn out from the water, hence Moshe, the one who's drawn out. And on the right, Sarah, you want to say anything about the image on the right?
So we have here the Seder plate. So you can see obviously the traditional ritual object at the Seder. And actually, Irv, I feel like I don't have as much to say as you probably do, at least from an
Yeah.
art historical perspective. I think it's important to keep you will see throughout Schick's work the kind of repetition of obviously the Star of David, um, and in general, kind of symbolism and heraldry that keeps coming back. So he believed very strongly um, and this is sort of adds both decorative elements and, as I said, symbolic elements. So something always to keep looking at in Schick's illuminations in particular is these kind of signatures that have meaning, like kind of heraldic um, signs and notions.
Yeah, and I'll add something else. I'm going to give the listeners a homework assignment. Go take a look at Michelangelo's Twilight and Dawn and see if these two figures who aren't at the top here, who are leading who are together, who are resting on this Star of David, if they don't look like Schick, if they don't tell you that Schick was aware of Michelangelo's work when he set out to do this. By the way, if you go into the Haggadah, you'll see something that you clearly knew. It clearly shows that Schick knew who Leonardo da Vinci is, and he had modeled one of his works of art that. But the Haggadah, again, is a whole other series of lectures, not even just one. But this is what to just try to give you the idea of this great book of freedom, what he's doing in it. And the two things he emphasized, one I talked about that Hitler was the new Pharaoh, the Nazis new Egyptian. The second thing Schick emphasized in the Haggadah was heroism. And you'll see figures in this Haggadah that are heroic, that have nothing to do with Passover, such as King David, Samuel slaying the king of Agag, nothing to do with the Haggadah, but everything for Schick, because these are heroic figures, and he wanted Jews in the mid-1930s to be heroic in Europe. But more about
Yeah.
that another time.
Yes, and no, that's a wonderful transition, and we're going kind of back just quickly to the heroic George Washington and this kind of, as you said, or this preoccupation that Arthur Szyk had with kind of the great heroes of history, both kind of ordinary, but also often militarily. I think
Mhm, mhm.
he very much equates the need or he champions the need for military defense and offense to secure those rights to freedom.
Sure.
So that is something that comes through in the work quite a bit. Um, and just again, want to reiterate that these three books of freedom really represent the three of the threads that really like kind of compose Arthur Szyk as a citizen, kind of nationally, religiously, allegiance wise. It's quite an interesting trio here that we bring together.
I'm going to add a fourth one, but it's not in the exhibit and deserves an exhibit himself. Schick was very concerned about the liberator of South America, Simon Bolivar. And also in the mid 1920s, he began to illustrate images, 51 paintings dealing with Bolivar. And they were
Fascinating.
exhibited, I think. They were exhibited in Washington, D.C. During the exhibit Bolivar in his time to parallel Washington and his times. But nonetheless, here you have it, Washington and his times. And we're going to get to something in a second that's very exciting about what happened to this series. But I'm not sure what the next slide is, Sarah, so go for it.
We'll go for it. Yeah,
Okay.
That's your cue.
So in any case, what happened to this original artwork? Where did it go? Well, I can tell you where the original artwork is of the Statutes of Kalish. That presently is at the Jewish Museum in New York. Where now is the Washington in his times, and how did it get there? Washington, it turns out that after Szyk exhibited it in Europe, and it was well known that the president of Poland bought this painting and the other 37, this series, and in 1935, at the very time that Szyk was working on this Haggadah, the Nuremberg laws were passed in Germany. In 1935, the president of Poland purchased this entire series of all original works of art of Washington in its times, and he gave it to President Roosevelt as a gift. And I think that was with the idea that there would be closer relations between Poland and America as things began to unfold and stir with the National Socialist government now in Germany. So that's where it was. And then what happened to this once it was given to Roosevelt? Sarah, are we ready to move on to the Four Freedoms yet?
Yes, we are. Oh, excuse me. No, we had two more.
Okay, two more Washingtons, but due to time, we probably should go to the
We
Four
just keep
Freedoms. What do you
going.
think?
There we go.
Okay, there you go. So follow this. Follow this. In 1935, they are given to Roosevelt. Roosevelt has them. In 1941, I know this says 1942, but bear with me. In 1941, and these paintings were done in 1942, but in 1941, in January, 11 months before the U.S. is in the war, Roosevelt gives his famous Four Freedoms speech to the American people, to the Congress and to the American people. And these are about the four universal freedoms that he believes that should be guaranteed to all people universally. And freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom from want, and freedom from fear. So the question is, everybody now knows the answer. What am I leading up to is, whose paintings on freedom were hanging in the White House? Not these are afterwards. Were hanging in the White House when Roosevelt gave his famous Four Freedom speech. And they were the 38 paintings on freedom of Arthur Szyk, of Washington in his times, were hanging there in the White House. How could you not be influenced by an artist, a Jewish artist, a Polish Jewish artist, who's not even lived, he had just come to America. Szyk came to America in 1940. But Roosevelt, he knows him through his art, as Eleanor Roosevelt did, and she wrote about him in her columns. But this is the man whose works on freedom were there when Roosevelt gave his Four Freedoms speech. And then Szyk in 1942 then went on to illustrate the Four Freedoms here, as you see. And later they were illustrated by the artist who actually made the Four Freedoms even more famous. And that artist is, as you see,
Norman Rockwell.
Norman Rockwell. And the contrast couldn't be more sharp, I would say. Sarah, is that something that you want to jump in on here a little bit?
Yes, I mean, thank you. Yeah, I mean, it's one of the earliest things I heard come from you, Irvin, is Arthur Szyk got there first. He did the Four
I'm
Freedoms
not, I
paintings
don't know.
before Norman Rockwell did, and of course they took very different approaches per their styles. So of course here you have a kind of wholesome view of American life, daily life, domestic life, and really kind of illustrative of what these freedoms represent, perhaps in one's real life. And Arthur Szyks really draw on medieval imagery, medieval illuminations, these powerful knights who are fighters for freedom. So they are fast and they're chock full of symbolism, of course. So absolutely fascinating kind of dichotomy, as you said, Irv.
Well, yeah, I mean, Schick saw himself as a fighting artist, a soldier in art. Freedoms have to be fought for. They're not guaranteed. And so this is, plays itself out very, very clearly here in the Four Freedoms, for sure.
Yeah. Um, So coming to the end here of the presentation, we just wanted to close with post-war two um, documents that share a lot of DNA and a lot of Schick's sort of passion and commitment to freedom. That's on the left side, the Declaration of Independence of the United States, which he issued on July 4th, 1950. And then on the right side, the Declaration of the Establishment of the State of Israel, 1948, the May 14th, 1948. Um, Irv, you want to jump in?
Yeah, and just as you see them here, this is how they were hung in Schick's home in New Canaan, Connecticut, where he moved after he lived in New York for 5 years and then moved to New Canaan in 1946 till 51 when he died. And they hung side by side in his home way before AIPAC, way before any organizations linked, America to Israel, Israel to America. Um, Amazing documents. Sarah, I want to go back to this, but let's take a look at the next slide just to show you how he used heroic figures. I think yes, this here you had George Washington, whom he put in the Declaration of Independence. Go back now so people can see where Washington is in the Declaration. Go back to the slide before, and you'll see in the bottom left-hand corner, Washington, whom he wants to elevate in terms of his importance. Schick does this all the time. George Washington was not present at the signing of the Declaration of Independence, but for Schick, he's heroic. He has to be here. Just like Schick in the Haggadah, um, where Aaron puts the staff before Pharaoh and tells let my and the words are let my people go. Schick moves Aaron out of there and puts Moses in there. He moves things around and is constantly doing that with his figures in history. Here you see it within the Declaration of Independence. And I should add the original artwork here of this Declaration of Independence is housed in the Library of Congress. And I've been told that during the celebration of 250th anniversary, that for the entire year, Schick's Declaration will be on view at the Library of Congress. So if you want to see the original, go there. If you want to see it in its brilliant detail and aren't making it to Washington, come to the exhibit because you're going to see the exact size. This is one of the largest of all of his works, and it's on exhibit. There are only a couple hundred of these reproductions that were made in 1950, special collotype lithographs on special kind of paper. And there you would see this and the is Schick's Declaration of Independence of the State of Israel. I know we're at the end, so I have something personal I want to say about Schick when it came to the Declaration of Independence of Israel. And Sarah, can you go to those two side by side again?
Yes, I just want to quickly point out these are a little bit out of order, but just the quotation down at the bottom. To my fellow Americans, I dedicate with love this immortal heritage of our forefathers. May these words live in our hearts forever and ever, for no good man loses his freedom but with his life. Arthur Szyk, New Canaan, Connecticut, July
Yeah.
4th, 1950.
He had read what some others had said, then he crafted his own words and put this on the original artwork at the library. It's not on the reproductions, but it's on the original artwork. But no man loses his life, but you know, loses his
with his
freedom, but
freedom,
with
but with his life.
his life. Yeah. And here, the Declaration of Independence of the State of Israel to the right. Julia Szyk, Arthur Szyk's wife, wrote in her memoirs that there were only 2 days where she ever saw him cry. One of them was that somehow when he suspected that his mother and brother, who were taken from the Lodz ghetto and murdered, he thought later they were in 46, he thought when they were murdered in Majdanek, but eventually it's learned, not during his lifetime, but afterwards, they were murdered at the Chelmno killing center. But that when he suspected that they were in one of the transports from the Łódź ghetto, she saw him cry. That was the first time. The second was when Israel was declared a state, May 14th, 1948, and he just sat down and cried, she writes in her memoirs, because, as she said, Arthur felt as if those who died for the creation of the state of Israel, those who fought for the creation of the state of Israel, were like his own children. And that is how he saw that, and that is how he bridged, his great love of freedom. I mean, you'll see that in this exhibit. It's incredible, and uh,
Thank
I hang these in my home. So if I feel his bridging between peoples and nations, you feel that all the time in his art. So
Absolutely that. Well, thank you so much, Irv. I'm excited to open the floor for some questions. And I will stop sharing and we can go back to the presentation if needed, but okay.
Amazing. Well, thank you both, Irvin and Sarah, for such a wonderful presentation. It was a perk for me to be able to sit behind the scenes and listen. We have some great questions from our audience. I'll try to get to as many as possible. So I'll also be, combining a couple that are similar in just an attempt to get to all of them. So first we have a couple people who are asking to know a little bit more, Sarah, about the curatorial and the research process for the exhibit. And in particular, we have one question that's asking about how, of course, this setting at a Holocaust museum as opposed to maybe an art museum or, a history center, historical center, um, impacted the curatorial decisions that you all made along the way?
Thank you. That's an excellent question. And we put this show together, really from the beginning with Irvin, which was, I will tell you, it just an absolute pleasure and real privilege because myself and the curatorial team had this font of information just a text or phone call away, which really helped to, allow us to establish the context and kind of find our ways into the show that made sense here at this museum and not, as you say, at an art museum. I think you know, what we I think the presentation we gave tonight really kind of gives you, and this is what I've been saying, when you come into the exhibition, you may be expecting to see one thing, that's something you know about Arthur Szyk. We wanted to kind of broaden and somewhat complicate what everyone kind of understands about Arthur Szyk. He wasn't just an anti-Axis cartoonist. Um, his Jewish identity was so part and parcel of how he understood freedom throughout his life. And we trace that throughout the exhibition. So whether that's, in his early life and a formative visit to Palestine and some of his work that makes allusions to biblical stories in the Jewish tradition, to his Holocaust advocacy during the Holocaust, during the war, to then his fierce Zionism toward the end of his life. All of this comes into play even as he is, kind of quite a cosmopolitan figure moving
Mhm.
through Europe to the United States, etc. So I would say that is really what binds everything together is that this person who was an artist really had the Jewish faith at the center of a lot of what he did.
Well, thank you. And we have sort of a similar question about how this exhibit interacts or maybe complements or adds to some of the other past exhibits of his work that Irvin, you mentioned earlier on in the presentation.
Oh, you're asking me how does this compare to other exhibitions of his art?
Hmm.
The answer is elements of this exhibit have been in almost every other exhibition, but they've had a different emphasis. This exhibit really, it's very fascinating because maybe you may go to fine arts museums of San Francisco where there was an exhibit, or you might go to the in which there was an exhibit in 2000 and 11 and in 2017 an exhibit at the New York Historical, and you'll see fine art. You'll see all the great details of the illuminations of the political art. You're going to see that here also. But those are focused, they're art exhibitions. This is an art exhibition, but it's more than an art exhibition because the ephemeral material, Szyk created his artwork for reproduction purposes because he had a message he wanted to deliver. So they were reproduced as poster stamps that would be on envelopes. They were reproduced in brochures that would raise funds for European Jewry during the war. They would be on magazine covers that would be used to get people to respond to particular causes, and you will see all of that within the exhibition. So there's an integration of both printed material and original material, and it's a focus on freedom. At a time when freedom, as it has been throughout the ages, is always being threatened. This
Hmm.
calls attention to a Jew who advocated for his own people and advocates for the peoples of the world as freedom itself is challenged throughout the world. And so this comes, uh, you know, Szyk used to say, I create my art for permanence because he believed that his art was needed in every age and in every time. And so, I mean, how is that different from other exhibitions? It's different because this has a particular focus on freedom, and it does it in different ways. And I also might add that you're going to see here uh, almost half of the original works of art on display have never been seen before, never been viewed before. So this exhibition will show you things about Arthur Szyk you never know. You're going to see a postcard from him when he's like a 21-year-old in a dapper hat, which has underneath it Arthur Szyk, spelled Szyk, and Arthur Schick, because he used to use different names, and you've never seen this, and it might be speculative, but here he was on a postcard where you're seeing that. And then you're going to see his World War I art. World War I. He was the director of art propaganda for Poland in its war with the Bolsheviks after World War I, 1919, 1920. So you're going to see original art from that period. I mean, Joseph and his brothers, you wouldn't think Arthur Szyk created a work like this, but this is large and it's different style. You wouldn't know it, but it is. We don't show anything that's Dali-esque in this exhibit, but I can show you art that looks exactly like Salvador Dali, but that's not here. So it's a combination of things, of the printed material working with the original material to brilliantly. The curators worked fabulous on this exhibit. You should see what they've done. Wait till you see. I know what I'm talking about.
Thank you, Irv. Yes, and I was going to add, and I'm so glad you did, yes, that there are many, many objects in this show, both ephemera and artwork, that have not been seen. And we can't overstate the kind of significance of that. So please do find yourselves here.
Thank you to Irvin and Sarah for coming tonight and giving this wonderful presentation. And of course, a thank you to our audience for joining us. We hope that if you enjoyed today's program, you'll consider making a donation to support the museum, which you can do at mjhnyc.org/support. We also hope that we'll see you for our upcoming programs, which you can find at mjhnyc.org/current events. And of course, we hope to see you on December 7th for the opening of this exhibition, or if you can't make it for the opening, visit us sometime after the 7th to see this exhibition.
Talking to everybody now from an apartment that I'm, rented here in New York for the state. I'm going to be at the exhibit on Sunday. If you're around, there's 3 tours that are going on. I hope I have my voice left. One at 11, 1, and 3. Someone asked how long is the exhibit running? To the end of July. It'll be up for July 4th, everybody. So, and it'll be up for Israel Independence Day. And there's lots of art in there that relate to both. I mean, I can go on and on, but Isabel, you just have the final word here, or Sarah.
We do hope to see you for Irvin's tours. You can register for those. They're free, but you can register on our programs page. Thank you so much for joining us. We hope to see you this Sunday. Thank you so much.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.